A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome to another week. Welcome to lockdown level 1, which means what can we do? We can go out for an extra 2 hours. We can buy wine on a Friday and not just a Monday to Thursday, so still on the weekends. We can travel a bit more, we think, at some point internationally. In about a week or two, we can supposedly go overseas. We just don't know where yet. So the world is shifting a little, and I suppose that's probably cause for celebration. But it's also cause for celebration this week because Thursday is National Heritage Day, when we celebrate this mad, crazy, vibrant patchwork quilt of a country that we call home, and the many different cultures, the different people who make it up. And yes, it's a country that drives us crazy half the time, but it's also a country that inspires and makes us smile. And I still firmly believe, for all of our troubles, and there are many, is a country quite unlike any other on earth. And there are many reasons for that. Principally, it's the people and the people of South Africa. The beauty of the country comes a very close second. But then it's lots of other additions, like watching South African golfers do so well over the weekend, or watching other sports people triumph in different parts of the world, or hearing a good news story about a South African product or a South African person doing well somewhere in the world. And it's that last category which ties directly in to my guest today. And you'll notice I said guest, not plural. Now, normally on these live tastings, we have 2, sometimes more guests, and we split between a couple of different wines, a couple of different brands, a couple of different estates. But today it's only one person, and there's a very good reason for that. This person is one of the godfathers of South African wine, and South African sparkling wine in particular, in which case he is the godfather. His wine has been served at the tables of Barack Obama, at presidential inaugurations, at the birthdays of, I think it was Oprah Winfrey had this at her birthday, events all over the world. It has become synonymous with South Africa and synonymous with the excellence of Cap Classique, which of course is the French word meaning better than champagne, but because it's made in South Africa, we have to use a different name. And by now you should have been able to work out exactly who my guest is. He comes armed with 8 bottles of Cap Classique, so I make no apologies for speaking Norwegian by the end of today's show. He's become a good friend through tasting and through watching and supporting the show online. And so a very, very warm welcome to the man whose birth certificate calls him Pieter Ferreira, but to the rest of us, he's simply Bubbles. Mr. Ferreira, very, very good evening. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine and Pick and Pay.
Thank you, Dan. It's wonderful to be back. You caught me in the act. I was just having a little soup song of delicious Blanc de Blanc. So it's really great to meet you this way. I mean, it would be really fun to be with you together and, share all the wines with you. But, this, I guess, is second best.
Well, I know it would be good fun because we've done it before. I had to travel all the way to London to find you for lunch and some bubbles with Mornay Morkel and Greg Sherwood and Dean Elgar. We had a terrific time at High Timber. Today we're separated by 1,000 kilometers or 2, and we're still going to be drinking some wine. And I've kept my first bottle unopened for a very specific reason, because I'd like to get, as we begin, oh, look, very artistic, as we begin our masterclass in Cap Classique, the art of opening a bottle of Graham Beck, which sits at the pinnacle of all things bubbly. I've started to just open like so. Is that correct? Am I doing it right?
Perfect. You did.
All right, so away comes.
Awesome.
Ta-da. Right, then the next one.
Dan, just have a look at the little foil inside. It's one of the reasons why we're together today. It says, celebrate what matters.
Ah, that's a lovely mantra, that. It really is. Celebrate what matters.
You know, I celebrate when my feet hits the ground in the mornings. When I get out of bed, I start celebrating.
There are many lines around champagne and around sparkling wine about, only drink it on weekdays and on weekends, and only drink it when you're thirsty or when you're not thirsty. It is such an all-encompassing drink, and we're going to talk about why that is and why it's so special to you. But I want to make sure I get this just right, so people know when they see me open a bottle that I've been to the Pieter Ferreira School of Excellence. What's my next step?
So the next thing that you'll see, there's a little ring on the bottle, and if you just bring it down like that, will make the twisting very easy. And it's 5.5 turns, and then the cage or the muselet will be loose. So you can turn 5.5 times.
Do I need to keep my hand on the top while I do that?
I normally just put my thumb. It's sort of a natural thing. It's just purposely that nobody gets knocked by the cork. So you turn it 5.5 times, and then the cage is, and I normally encourage people to leave the cage on the bottle. Just take a firm grip on the bottle itself and on the cork, and then you just twist the bottle, and you'll feel the cork start rising, and then you just control the popping sound. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well done.
I feel even more professional already. We've only been going for 3 minutes. Tell me, people will see now. Today for me is a day of not just tasting your quite fabulous range of Cap Classique, but understanding champagne-style wine, which you make so well and have done for so long. And I want to ask all the questions that people often don't ask, because they think, oh, I'll sound a bit stupid if I don't know the answer to that. Let's ask them. Let's find them out. Let's start with that first one. That wisp of smoke that came off the top there. I know it's a good thing. I'm not sure why. What is it, and why is that important?
Well, that is really just to show that the wine was under pressure. You know, where when we produce the wine, we actually develop 6 atmospheres of pressure. And if you consider the car that you drive in, the tire pressure of a motor vehicle is only 2 bars of pressure. There's quite a lot of pressure in a bottle of sparkling wine. So that is just really that sort of little CO2 smoke that really comes out, or haze, is really just to show that the wine contains some bubbles.
Which it should when one is talking to Bubbles Ferreira. Yeah. I know it's a good thing my smoke is out there. What about pouring it? Which glasses am I using? And is there a technique to getting it into the glass?
Well, you know, I just, that is really a great little subject on its own. Is different glasses or stemware. You can see the idea of moving to much wider bowls or tulip-shaped glasses is much better, because it allows the wine to expand, but it keeps the aroma in the bottle. A bottle like this, you know, a glass like this, if you fill it up, you have very little aromatic space for the wine to perform. So the less volume you have in the glass, the more aromatics you can show.
Right. Well, I'll try and show you. I've got quite a large glass here, which maybe not quite as curved at the top as it should be to keep the aromatics in, but it'll do the job for now. So I've put that in.
If you, sorry, just on the pouring, got a beautiful punt, and it's really nice to put your thumb in there, and you rest your fingers like that, and then you can comfortably pour much easier, and you can reach to glasses, you know, a little further away. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Perfect. You're a great scholar.
I have a great teacher. All right. Well, let's.
Yeah. So as we go through, you know, the effervescence, you will see once you've poured, there's beautiful bubbles rising, bringing all the aromatics into the open space of the glass. So all you really have to bring is just bring your. And sometimes a very young Cap Classique will be quite frivolous. You know, it will knock you away a little bit. But if you just give it a half a minute, then the wine is settled perfectly in the glass, and you'll get all the aromatics. And definitely, the wine that we're trying now is definitely showing much more of the primary fruit, which it's really stylistically, that is how we intended to show you the Graham Beck fruit, is to show more primary aromatics. And then the little yeast impression will be rather on the palate. when we go to our vintage wines, which is wines that will stay in the cellar for much longer, you will definitely get more of a sort of yeast impression on the nose itself.
This fruit has become world famous, and I want to delve into the particular wine in just a moment. But take us back a step in terms of the making of this. Why can I not just get a bottle of Chardonnay, stick it into a soda stream, bang, I've got some champagne, and away I go? I know it's a bit more complicated than that, but why? What is the process? And what is it that makes this so special?
Yeah, I mean, you can also say, doctor, I got the pain. No, I'm not, I'm just joking. But, you know, I really, we get asked that question, you know, why do we go through all the intrinsics to put so much effort into creating a Cap Classique? It's really, I think it's all about the intrinsic values that you are adding to the wine, you know. And when I get a question like you've just asked, you know, why don't we just put some gas into it? It's a little bit like I have to ask you, do you like artificial insemination or the real thing, you know? So I think that is where we can leave it.
Only Bubbles Ferreira would give you that as a comparison, and it is one that I think is very, very quick to understand.
You know, the one is really, you know, the one you just you have a pressure vessel, you inject gas into it, and you have wine with bubbles, or you know you've got a still wine that you can transform, but it hasn't had the yeast contact time. And the beauty about Cap Classique, it involves, and the magic all happens in the secondary fermentation, where the wine develops its own natural CO2, but it's always exposed to some lees, and the lees brings the magic to the wine over time, you know. So it definitely brings far more flavor and conversation about a wine rather than just putting gas into a Chardonnay.
Tell me about the grapes, as you mentioned Chardonnay. When we look at most bottles of Cap Classique, of Champagne, of similar styles around the world, tends to be Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier, those kind of headline. There are exceptions. I know Ken Forrester makes sparkling wine out of Chenin Blanc, but if Ken Forrester had his way, he'd make Cabernet Sauvignon out of Chenin Blanc. That's just Ken. But why do we use these three chief grapes? What is it about them that doesn't apply to other grapes in terms of why you select them?
I think that is where we embrace diversity in South Africa, is that we have never prescribed any specific varieties to be made as Cap Classique. So we give sort of a playroom or an area for people to do some really interesting things with other varietals. But if you delve into the secret of Champagne, we've learned over the many years that Champagne's been around, that Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, you know, it's not only the king and queen from Burgundy, but it produces and has the ability to produce so many exciting aromatics at low sugars, keeping in mind that the secondary fermentation produces more alcohol. So I think you just have to understand that Chardonnay and Pinot Noir has the affinity to give you more flavor.
In terms of the wines that you make, there'll be people who might, like I do, remember a wine like the William, for instance, one of the great red blends that you used to have, the Pheasant's Run, terrific Sauvignon Blanc. You made the decision a few years back to say goodbye to still wine. You had in the form of Erika Obermeier, one of the great young winemakers of the world, who's now doing terrific things with Erika Obermeier wines. You had to decide, you know what, this is our specialty, and just go to Bubbles. How tough was that decision, and what was it that really prompted it?
Well, I think we didn't really lose our sort of senses along the way. But, you know, if you look into the 30 years of Graham Beck, and this year has just been the 30th harvest at Graham Beck, you know, his original vision was to be a leading Cap Classique producer that we can take into the international market. And that has also sort of really been the driving behind it. And then Graham Beck acquired the historical Bellingham farm, which became Graham Beck Franschhoek. And, naturally, with the investments that we had, we obviously ventured into still wines. But we came to sort of a critical point 6 years ago, and we sort of took a look into the crystal ball, and we asked people, if we say Graham Beck, what is it about? And they said it is bubbles. So we realized at that point that we couldn't be everything to everyone, and that bubbles was our forte, and that was how the decision was made.
It's not for me to question it, and the bubbles you make are terrific, and it sent Erica spiraling into a wonderful new space. But I still remember with fond nostalgia the wine, and in fact, I found this in my cellar yesterday evening. There's some 2011 the Joshua, your Shiraz Pionnier from a few years back.
Yeah. Dan, we still shared some crocodile tears. Trust me. We were really in love with the wines we did, and Erica was amazing. She took over from Charles Hopkins, who's now at the Grendel. And kudos to Erica for, producing these incredible, beautiful wines, the Joshua, the William, the Andrew, Baudade, and, out of Robertson, we made Lonial and the Ritz Syrah. We still, fortunately, we kept some in our library, which we happily share with people. But it just came to a point, and, our intentions is to be the leading producer in South Africa, but to get international recognition.
Well, speaking of international recognition, I see Andrew Woolger's checked in from North Carolina. The information from these interviews is invaluable for the likes of me selling South African wines over here. People love MCC. Standard is high quality and great value. Andrew, good to know that Cap Classique's making its way to North Carolina, and it's lovely to see it going all over the world. This wine is not new to America, because that's a great story to kick off our introduction to this particular wine, to this brew. This wine was rather liked by Mr. Barack Obama, Bubbles.
Dan, I have to sort of just take you a little bit back. We were extremely proud and honored to be that this wine was selected to be used at Nelson Mandela's inauguration. So the first sort of democratic elected president in South Africa, which opened the wine markets for us again in '94. So it was used there. And when we took the story to the US, we had to take the Mandela story with us. So wherever we walked in the streets, whether it was New York, California, or wherever, we always had a bottle of the Brut under our arm, and we introduced it by telling the Mandela story, and the Americans loved us. So, we happened to get a bottle to Chicago, where we introduced it to a sommelier, and this sommelier loved the story of Mandela, and he said, "Stop right there. I have the right customers which will understand the story." And lo and behold, it was Senator Obama who declared him as the elected candidate for the Democrats in 2008, in February 2008. And they went to celebrate at the restaurant where the sommelier was. And as they walked in, they were offered a glass of sparkling wine. And the story was, it was used at Nelson Mandela's inauguration. So the penny dropped there, and that is really a few months later, in November, 4th of November, Michelle Obama insisted that she wanted to have a Graham Beck Brut before he did his inception speech. So it's a magic story. It really still resonates. Today we don't speak too much about presidents, but it's fit for any president. if you become the president of your golf club, we have the wine for you, Dan.
I have great ambitions. So the moment I get there, Peter, you'll be the first person to know. It's all well and good, though, to have that story. And we've said that with many different wines, especially wines where people have put a celebrity name to them. There's been a big occasion around them. You can get past that. Ernie Els said it perfectly. Ernie Els can sell wine for one season. Ernie Els wine has to sell Ernie Els wine for the remaining season. And you've consistently created with this fruit a wine that just delivers. What is it about it that just hits that right note season after season after season?
It's really about two things. It's about consistency and continuity that we want to carry through every single bottling. So the importance is not only the attention to detail that we put into the wine, but it's also the use of our perpetual reserve. It might sound like a foreign name to everyone, but it's a global reserve that was started when the cellar was started. So it is 30 years worth of little portions that we've put into a collective that we can blend in every year to maintain this consistency and continuity. We definitely know it's classic. The Veuve Clicquot champagne drinker is not the Laurent Perrier drinker, and likewise, I think you can dial it down to Cap Classique as well. You will have followers for another brand and you'll have followers for Graham Beck.
And those followers have a certain level of expectation. We had a good mutual friend of ours, Gareth Robertson from Antony Rupert, trying some of the Le Morin non-vintage brut last week, and he was talking about getting that consistency, because you've got people, much as when they buy a bottle of non-vintage Moutet Chandon or Veuve Clicquot, they're expecting something. How difficult is it to ensure that when I open a glass that you've made in 2003, even though it's non-vintage, that's the year you've bottled it, that in 2010 and in 2020, as the consumer, I'm recognizing and right, bang, that is Graham Beck Brut.
Yeah, I think overall, it's most probably the overriding rule is your selection process and the attention to detail and quality. We always say at Graham Beck, quality is not a destination; it's a journey. If we have this type of quality, this is only the start to drive it up to the next quality. So it's extremely important to have that consistency and continuity. And it is also stylistically, the wine we're tasting is a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, 51% Pinot Noir, 49% Pinot Noir. And we'd love to show the importance of Chardonnay as an entry to this wine. And then on the palate, you will get a little bit more Pinot Noir richness. And that is what we strive every year. So when Pierre is my winemaker in Robertson, when we sit down and we do our selections, we will always look back into wines that we have in the library, purely for making sure we tick the boxes in consistency and continuity.
Of course, that is just one of your challenges, because you don't only make one bottle of Cap Classique. People think, oh, we must make two. No, I've got 8 of them here from the current selection. And you might think, well, how on earth do you make 8 different bottles from exactly the same style of wine? Well, you do so quite simply when you're Pieter Ferreira. We've got some slightly sweeter stuff, and in just a moment, we're going to try the Bliss Nectar. But before we go to the Bliss Nectar, take me through this bottle here, if you will, Mr. Ferreira. Brut Zero, I'm thinking Coke Zero, I'm thinking I drink this, it's fat-free, it's calorie-free, and I'll be like a masculine Kate Moss by Christmas.
Oh, wow, how much time have we got? No, Brut Zero is the reference to no sugar added. For the consumer out there, it is bone dry, so there is no sugar really added at the point of disgorging. We still have to add sugar for the secondary fermentation in the bottle, but that is all consumed by the yeast. and the wine then becomes bone dry. So there's no sugar left. But such as a thing out there of sugar-free wine, there is no such wine you will find ever anywhere in the world, because a little bit of the sugar that comes from the natural grape is fructose, and fructose is extremely difficult to ferment. So invariably, the wine will have some residual sugar, but it's minute. We're talking of sometimes less than 1 gram, or just around 1 gram per liter. So in the final process, the 0 is the reflection that we add no sugar in the dosage, which is the little topping wine that we will use prior to getting its final cork and wine on. So that is the thing. So this wine will also be lower in calories, because there is no sugar, but it's not calorie free. But I have a lovely story that my kids taught me. They said this is the skinny jean project wine. You drink enough of it and you get into skinny jeans.
I can feel myself slipping into them already, just looking at the bottle. I do like that 0 dosage style, because I love that dryness, that really parched feel.
Sorry, Dan. The other importance of how do we get to a wine by not adding sugar, that this wine will remain on the lees, on that yeasty sediment, for 6 years prior to disgorging. So it is really important, because that little bit of sugar that we add right at the end, I call lipstick and eyeshadow. You know, we can color a wine in, and that's most probably the next wine we're going to taste. We can make a wine look very sexy by adding a little bit of sugar. But this is a wine, it's a naked wine. It's got no lipstick, it's got no eyeshadow, so we can't hide anything. So you have to be very precise in your selection to make sure you can show the purity and the intrinsics of the wine as we intended to show.
And I think worth mentioning as well, 2014, you've got a lot of patience in preparing this wine. So it's only just been released, but it goes back 6 years. So you're drinking something with a real vintage feel.
One last thing on all of our wines, you will definitely see on the back label the date of disgorging. So, you know, there we can, you know, if we are talking about 5 or 6 years on the lease, you can just turn it around, look at the vintage, and then you can sort of use your calculator to get to the time on the lease. So it helps the consumer to understand how long it's been in the winery.
It's more complicated than just knocking back bubbles and eating smoked salmon, which is kind of what I thought Peter did most of the day. He clearly does a little bit of work occasionally. Peter, I also want to have a quick look at this Brut Rosé, because it's another question that people will ask. So I see this Brut Rosé, and I see that it is a Pinot Noir Chardonnay. I see the Brut that we've just been drinking, and that is Chardonnay Pinot Noir. So what I'm thinking is you've turned them around. The Chardonnay Pinot Noir is the white one. This is the Pinot Noir Chardonnay. Obviously, you just added more red wine, and that makes it pink. Would that be correct?
Definitely not. It's forbidden. We don't allow any addition of red wine. What we do is, because of our compositions of our grape resources, 75% of all currently grown comes from our estate in Robertson. And then we have a little bit of very special parcels of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from other geographical areas. And we do it purposely because we want to add to the flavor spectrum of the wines. And for the rosé non-vintage, this one over here, some of the grapes will actually come as far as Stellenbosch and Slanghoek Valley, which is near Rawsonville in the Brede Kloof. Those grapes takes up to 4 or 5 hours to reach Robertson. So I call it the shake, rattle, and roll. And if it's Pinot Noir, you know, the whole bunches that's transported gets shaken up a little bit by the not so much potholes as you have in Gauteng type of thing, but by the time it gets there, there's a natural enzymatic reaction, and we get natural color. And you will use the Pinot Noir as the color for, or the base for the color of the rosé, and blend it with Chardonnay.
So the aesthetic is the difference we all notice, but they're really basically just very close cousins, and it's more what, a case of time than anything else that differentiates between the two of them.
Well, you know, you can take a white wine and pour 3 or 4 or 5% red wine into it, and you can call it rosé. It's completely legal because the classification for rosé is really an open one. You have spectrum from really a very blush-looking wine to a much deeper red hue. It's not really controlled that way, but we have far more fun taking that deeper hue of Pinot Noir-based wines as a base, and then we bring the Chardonnay to it, so we don't have to remove the color. We're not taking anything away from the wine, and that will give you the intrinsics to the rosé, which is similar to what we do for the Bliss Rosé Nectar.
Which is our next wine on the agenda. So I'm going to open this. Now, if you've just logged on, and if I'm looking down, I see Etienne Reinecker, the professional rugby player, is watching us. Luke Bolland, my good friend from Hong Kong, is online. And I see Priscilla Lutalo, the Ugandan wine critic, who's just been on a shoplifting tour of Athens, is watching as well. If you see here, my technique is immaculate because right at the start of the show, Pieter taught me how to open it.
It's improving big time.
There are those who suggest it couldn't have got worse. Do you ever use the sabrage technique yourself, Pieter?
You know what? I respect people who started the sabering in Cap Classique, so I prefer to do it in sort of many obscure ways. You know, we can use the stem of the glass, the footpiece, and do a sabrage. So you know, I do have a saber, but yeah, it's out of respect. Oh, good for you. That's it. Oh yes, this wine is alive.
All right. So it's not the second wine we're talking about, but it is the second wine that we are trying. And the fact that you've labeled it Bliss suggests that you quite like it. Bliss Nectar. Talk us through the name and the wine that it's leading into.
Well, first of all, the reference to bliss, it's just, you know, I think you feel quite blissful when you have a glass of this. And, you know, I've been doing a few Zoom tasting hours to the US, and it happens to be at close to midnight or somewhere. So, you know, all I can say, if you have a wine like this, it's 11 o'clock somewhere in the morning. So it's definitely much more of an early morning type of wine, a wine that is much more al fresco in style. And nectar relates to a little bit more sugar. So sometimes people are too afraid to talk about, they don't drink dry, they like something slightly sweeter. And I think the nectar, and thanks to Champagne, because they brought Moet and Chandon's Brut Imperial, or their Nectar Imperial into South Africa, which is definitely, you know, shown the main market where you should be drinking your wine. So Bliss Nectar just, I think, completes the story, you know. So you feel blissful, and nectar is just the impression of slightly more sugar.
The wine that we know is demi-sec, would that then be in the same sort of space?
Yes, I think this is it's the overriding name for the demi-sec or the sec. You know, there's some crazy ruling, it's an international ruling about sugar levels. But, from brut, you go to extra dry, then you go to sec, which is also dry, and then you go to demi-sec. So I think nectar is an overriding category that means it's not brut, but it's slightly sweeter. So I think that's the simplest way to explain.
And I guess then, depending on the level of sec, you've got to determine the sec's appeal of your wine. But I'll leave that up to you, Mr. Ferreira, to determine.
Well, I think, yeah. What comes to mind when you nose this wine is a little bit more like cotton candy floss. You feel the sweetness, but as soon as you take it to the palate, it's actually fresh because, the wine's still got beautiful natural acidity and it's really keeping the sugar completely balanced. So, I love this wine. And again, there's no red wine put into this wine. You can see the color there. It is, again, using the little skin contact Pinot Noir as the base, and then we blend some Chardonnay.
In terms of that extra sugar, is this simply Peter opening up the barrel with a 2 kilogram packet of Hewlett's and depositing it, or is it a little more scientific than that?
It's a touch more scientific, but I like your thinking, Dan. It will make our lives a little bit easier, but it is completely calculated because, again, we're working on consistency and continuity for Graham Beck. It's really important for us. But this will be the equivalent of 24 to 27 grams per liter of sugar, considering that demi-sec is 32 minimum grams per liter.
All right. So if your standard drink at the back end of a big night out is cane and cream soda, this is the direction you're heading in, but it's not that overwhelmingly sweet. Now, I actually find this. I was on safari recently. We had a bottle of this over breakfast, actually. It was a really good choice. And there was just an energy to it, and it sat quite nicely on the palate. Generally, I prefer a bit less sugar in my bubbles, but this worked out nicely. I think your one in particular, it's not that sickly sweet. It's not overwhelmingly sweet. It just gives it a little bit more presence. And for me, it makes quite a nice difference to what I'm normally drinking, Peter.
Dan, it reminds me of many years ago when I was introduced by my late father to wine. I was still a youngster. I mean, still far too young to be, out of school. But the first thing that made sense was that you could drink a wine with a little bit more sugar, but your palate becomes sophisticated over time. And definitely, I think there's nobody that really has started bone dry and, has stayed there. We all started slightly sweet. And today we are drinking far more sophisticated because your palate has been evolving, as you've been going through the process of enjoying wines.
But also important to say, as we do very frequently on this show, that the two types of wine are the ones you like and the ones you don't, and that this is the style you like. That's absolutely brilliant because it is a terrific wine. We're only 4 bottles down from all of these 8, so it's probably going to be the longest show in the history of Dan Really Likes Wine, but happily so. As I finish off this glass, I'd just like to have a look. I think we've got one other, might be is there a rosé? There we go, the Bliss Nectar. This is the normal one. So we've had the rosé. If we go back to the Bliss Nectar of the white variety, the Chardonnay Pinot Noir, other than the color, what's the difference between these two?
Well, they made completely individual. It's not like we have the brut and the rosé and then we just sweeten them up. We actually have a selection process after harvest. We will start off with a minimum of 150 different individual components that we will start selecting for these 8 wines we are tasting today. And, Bliss Nectar Rosé, Bliss Nectar Brut, the white blend, all have a very specific blend, which is unique. It's not a clone of something. They completely stand alone. because I think that is the only way we can keep ourselves honest, really, is by making sure whatever we intended to send into the market, the label will express all of that.
Well, that market is generally very happy, and we've got some more evidence of that. Grant Souls is a regular viewer, the South African philanthropist. The Bliss is my all-time favorite. That's an unequivocal endorsement of your...
absolutely. Wow. Thanks, Grant. That's awesome.
And Grant knows his wine, so there we go. So we've got these. I know we're building up to something particularly special, and in fact I can reveal what it is because we've got somebody on the line who is beside himself with excitement. You know him well, Pieter. We know him as the worst dressed man in the wine industry with one of the finest palates, and he's saying that he's very excited about what we're about to drink, dying to taste the Masters 14 Cuvée Clive, says Greg Sherwood.
No. How's it, Greg? Yeah, it's a little bit, Dan, that's a little bit like a partner in crime, if the walls can speak in high timber, my goodness, Yeah, anyway, that's awesome. But if I could just say one more thing, this is most probably the most unique vintage rosé you will ever find in South Africa. The only reason why I say this is not a blended wine. Our vintage rosé, which is based on Pinot Noir, we actually will take 4 loads of Pinot Noir grapes into the press, and then we will add 1 load of Chardonnay into the press until the press is full. So that combination is roughly an 80-20 combination, and we will actually co-press Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the press, and the wine forever lives as a blend prior to fermentation. So that is really unique, and it brings so many different attributes. If I can just show the label once more, there it is, and it's our new release 2015. But we can go on to the next one.
Yeah, so I think just quickly though, before we go on to that next one, I just want to reinforce that we mentioned earlier the 6 years on the Brut Zero, 5 years on the Pinot Noir Rosé. You don't release stuff 8 minutes after you've made it. There's a real process of time engaging with the wine that you make, giving it the hours, the weeks, the months, the years that you feel is deserved to bring the very best out of it.
You cannot. There's no shortcut to quality. The intensity and the way the wine should speak, really, it definitely needs time. And my fellow winemakers in Cap Classique, that we all know that. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, but if you can have the support to keep wines much longer on the lease, it's so much more rewarding. So yeah, there is just, unfortunately, you can't get the clock to run quicker. You have to abide time. Yeah.
Now, I'm glad that's the case, because the rest of the world tends to work on fast forward. So it's nice that wine still keeps us balanced with our sense of time. We're building up to that Cuvée Clive. Greg Sherwood following up with Pieter is actually my hero, says Mr. Sherwood. In fact, you can see Greg there. That's Greg and his oldest daughter on their holiday at Hartbeespoort Dam last year. You can see on the photo. He's waiting for the Cuvée Clive. Just before we go there, though, this is not a wine I particularly enjoyed, which is not to say I don't love all of them, but this here, this is your Blanc de Blanc, which is the 2016, first 4 years old, released. People will see this Blanc de Blanc and wonder exactly what does that mean. Is it the whitest of white? What does Blanc de Blanc mean? How do you make this? What is special about this wine?
Yeah, it happens to be one of my favorite wine styles to produce. Is 100% Chardonnay. Obviously, when you go into the intrinsics of champagne, and please do understand, I'm not trying to imitate or be similar to champagne. We will always be the better alternative if you don't want to do champagne. But my divine inspiration comes from there. And it is a terminology that the champenois use when they have different blocks or villages of Chardonnay going into the expression of a Blanc de Blanc. So it means white from white. So it's 100% white grapes. So you can have Chenin Blanc and Chardonnay as a Blanc de Blanc. It will still classify as that, but invariably, because we only grow Chardonnay in Graham Beck and we only work with Graham Beck Chardonnay at the moment, it will be a selection of the best Chardonnays of that specific year to express the vintage.
All right, so very, very specific and very successful. Greg Sherwood confirming that Blanc de Blanc, our biggest selling Graham Beck MCC, that is at Hanford Wines, the money laundering operation in South Kensington that masquerades as a wine shop. Reginald Peckler is reporting in. Hi, Meneer Bubbles. You're an icon for South African sparkling wine. Quebec Clive will always be the best. Congratulations for a spectacular award-winning wine, all the way from Cheetah Plains, where I was just a few weeks ago. Reggie, good to see you watching, and thank you for joining us. And they've got a wonderful cellar up there, and it's a beautiful part of the world. And then there's Josephine Prieur, who joins us regularly. Bienvenue, Josephine. Peter, when can we get in France or in Europe this rosé? Hello to Anne. I presume that's your vintage Pinot Noir rosé. When can she get hold of it?
I'll send, dear Josephine, I will send a little list of things. It's quite easy, you know. There's a little bit of cross-bordering. So we have an agent in Belgium that will be able to supply in France. So Josephine, I will look after you.
There we go. There is good news indeed. And even better news to wrap up. We've already either tasted or spoken about 7 magnificent examples of Cap Classique. Here's this one. Now, if Greg Sherwood, and I give Greg a lot of abuse, he deserves all of it, but if Greg Sherwood tells you that he is really looking forward to a wine, this is the kind of wine you should bath in. You should sell it for your grandchildren. You should sell the children for, plus the family silver, and buy cases of, because it means it must be quite special. And this is the Cuvée Clive. Before I open it with my newfound professional technique, which you've taught me, an issue of nomenclature, and I've kept the first half of this question right to the end because it leads into the second. First of all, for people who are thinking, well, this is Pieter Bubbles Ferreira. He seems to be the guy behind Graham Beck, and his name is not Graham Beck. So who was Graham Beck? And then from there, Clive, who is or was Clive?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I've had 31 years of an amazing journey with the Beck family. Graham Beck was a real astute businessman. He was always under the radar because he never had any business partners. He didn't believe in that. He was a very successful coal miner. He ventured into being and he still is one of the leading thoroughbred breeders in the US. And he ventured into wine purely because he had his horses in Robertson, for the reason that he got a lot of calcium through the feed that the horses had eating the grass, because Robertson region is full of limestone. So he had an inkling that it could be good. If it's good for horses, it must be good for wine. And in a short way, nearly 31 years ago, I met up with Graham Beck, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey. So and today we have a sister winery called Steenberg in Constantia. And obviously, I did mention earlier that we also had Graham Beck in Franschhoek, but yeah, that belongs to the Ruperts now. So yeah, very astute and Through the years, you showed some labels. The Joshua was Graham Beck's second name, the wine that you have there, the 2011. So we had a lot of family names running through the wines. And when I realized that Robertson region can produce a pinnacle Cap Classique, we sort of ambled with the ideas of what is the next name. And there was a second son, Clive, who sadly passed away, but many, many years ago. That wasn't really part of the... But I said that's the only thing we can use. So Cuvée Clive is the reference to our prestige cuvée. And it's really developing its own following, and thanks to Greg listening in, he's even got it at Hanford Wine. So.
Well, Greg there saying Cuvée Clive is next level and epic. So good to hear from Greg. And then also a message there we heard from Josephine Prieur, who says that she's now in Paris, back this week in Burgundy and all well, and had some South African wine. Let us know what South African wine you had, Josephine. Would be lovely to hear. And then a word from someone whose role, and you'll forgive me for revealing this, Peter. I know it's not terribly widespread, but Anne Ferreira, saying ça va, Josephine, Anne Ferreira, who is Peter's significantly younger wife, confirming that she loves the wine. What people don't know is that Anne tastes every single vintage of every single one of Peter's wines every single day. Now, if that is not commitment, I do not know what is. So, Anne, thank you for all the fabulous support. I've got the wine. I'm opening it up. You've already explained why so much of this wine is properly rock star stuff. Peter, why is this? Why is this the wine that has Greg Sherwood frothing at the mouth and has the Cap Classique loving world dying to get this into their glasses?
I can't wait, Dan. Go for it.
Well, here we go. Opening it up. So this is the Cap Classique. The Cuvée Clive. Oh. There we go. As I pour it, I think part of my last question might have got slightly lost. Tell me why is this so special, Peter? What makes this stand out from the pack so much?
It's going to be difficult to try and understand what I'm saying. It's a wine with no rules, so it's not really because it's a hit and miss. It's really the 1 year it could be 100% driven by Chardonnay. The 1 year it could be even 100% driven by Pinot Noir. It has no real recipe. When we start off with 150 different components after the vintage, we will do a super selection and we will keep refining the different components that we really think is the super best. And whether one component or 8 components arrive on the day we decide on Cuvée Clive, between Pierre and I, we have taken it in the past. We've taken the hit on the chin and says, it's not good enough. And we will walk away. But we are fortunate that our vineyards are much more matured now. We're looking back also quite a few years now. And we're getting far more consistency of the same exact blocks. So the selection process for Cuvée Clive is a little bit more interesting because we have much more to select from. And 2014 is just this beautiful wine, and extremely excited about it. And again, a wine that will spend 5 years on the lease prior to it being released. And and this happens to be 100% Pinot Noir. Sorry, this is not Pinot Noir. This is Chardonnay. Sorry, Dan. It's just super special.
Well, there's not much I can add to it other than say it's an absolute triumph of Cap Classique. But I would like you to tell me, rather than me tell the world, of a particular endorsement. There's a guy who knows a little bit about South African wine called Tim Atkin. And if memory serves, quite recently, he thought this was quite nice.
Yeah, I really, a big toast to Tim. He does a fantastic job for the New World, and South Africa, I think, is starting to see the benefits of Tim Atkin report. So on a yearly basis, Tim, he either comes out, but this year due to COVID, it was far more challenging for him. But he does a South African report. And then obviously he has his top selections, and there's only one prize that goes to the top Cap Classique in South Africa. So Cuvée Clive is now the previous vintage was 2012, and the 2014 also got the kudos. So it's building up a beautiful reputation. So we're extremely grateful that we can show consistency and continuity going forward. And thanks to Tim, it is South Africa's top Cap Classique this year.
And a very well-deserved accolade. If you haven't tried it, it is one to get your hands on, and it's the perfect way to wrap up this particular edition of Dan Really Likes Wine. Just before we do say goodbye to Bubbles, I see Elizabeth Bardan writing in great info. Elizabeth, glad you appreciated the show and the delight of having Mr. Ferreira with us. Anne responding to Josephine. You've always been one of the best wine ambassadors for South Africa. So thank you, Anne, but also thank you to Josephine. And then a question from Greg Sherwood just before we wrap up. And that is, how much quality is down to the limestone soils? Big role in Chardonnay. What role does it play in your wines, Peter?
Sure. Well, when I met Graham Beck, and Greg will most probably understand that, and maybe not all the listeners, but Graham Beck said there's only one Saun, it's Robert Saun. Okay, so it just means it's abundance of sunshine. So we embrace sunshine at Robertson. We've certainly learned, we've turned the verticultural approaches virtually upside down. You won't read what we do in our own vineyards in wine books, because we understand the effect of sunshine. But besides the sunshine, it is the natural limestone, and for the simple reason it builds stronger horses, but also it ensures beautiful natural acidity and extremely lower pHs in the soil due to the limestone content of our soils in Robertson. And then thirdly, what Robertson has, which nobody else really have, is we have this huge day and night temperature shift, which is known as the diurnal shift. So we can comfortably be at a 36, 38 degree day. That is bloody hot. But at night, we will lose 20 degrees. And there is no other area in the Western Cape that really can show that. And with that, we have natural preservation of acidity as well for our Cap Classiques.
I'm not sure there are many places in the world where they make wine of a sparkling nature with that sort of difference. It obviously plays a big role. So does the terroir, so too does the expertise of those around you. But I think there is one key element to the making of Graham Beck Cap Classique that has driven it, that has taken it to the heights it is at, and it has it celebrated around the world. And that particular element is a bespectacled gentleman with a line in fabulous shirts who just makes absolutely wonderful wine year in, year out. So, Peter, thank you not just for being part of the show today, but for giving us such fabulous wine and for taking that wine to people like Oprah Winfrey, people like Barack Obama, taking this South African story all over the world. Because although it speaks to Graham Beck immediately, it speaks to South African wine as a whole, and we all benefit from that. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And next time you in the Cape, we will definitely open the other bottles together. And thank you very much for allowing me so much time. I'm really privileged. Thank you.
Well, I was about to ask you about that trip down, so put that on the agenda. I've got 5 unopened bottles. We'll try those ones when we're down there. This has been an absolute delight. I had loads of fun on this show. I get to sit and chat to the most amazing people about wine 2-3 times a week, and I love it. But today, to talk to someone who's so good at what he does, so celebrated for what he does, and has such a wonderfully engaging style when discussing a wine space that people are sometimes a little bit unsure about. How do they make it? Why is it so different? How does it all come together? I think we've learned a lot today. Whether you're the person who's picked up their very first glass or you're Greg Sherwood, master of wine, everybody learns something in a space like this, particularly from somebody like Peter. So big thank you to Pieter Ferreira, to Bubbles, and to his team, and to the guys today who joined us watching. Really do appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. That wraps us up. Just a couple of things before we go. If you haven't already, make sure you're part of that Pick and Pay Wine Club. So many great reasons to be part of it. 3 times the Smart Shopper points, a chance to get 20% off on 10 different wines every single month. There are case deals, there are magnum deals, and it's just a really good portal into a huge variety of South African wine. And also make sure, if you haven't already, enter our Anthony Rupert competition, #Steak and Syrah, your chance to win for yourself one of 4 cases, not bottles, 4 cases of the Cape of Good Hope Riebeeck Syrah ahead of National Heritage Day on Thursday. It's a photo of your best steak, a photo of your bottle of Syrah or Shiraz, anyone you like. Post it up there, and Gareth Robertson from Anthony Rupert Wine will choose 4 winners on Thursday, which is National Heritage Day. So that does wrap us up. Massive thank you to Pieter Ferreira. If you haven't tried his wine yet, where have you been? Get hold of some, but look at in particular for that Cuvée Clive 2014. It really is just quite magnificent. A wonderful selection, a great cross-section of the different styles of Cap Classique made here in South Africa. And a reminder, yes, the French made champagne, but we made Cap Classique to improve upon it. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and there won't be a show on Thursday. No live show. It's a public holiday. I'm taking the day off on Thursday, but next Monday I'll be at Element House in Cape Town with a wonderful sommelier called Wave and one of the finest cellars in the country, and online tomorrow drinking wine in the Sabi Sands with Dakar winner Janelle de Villiers, our regular weekly episode. Thanks to everyone watching, particularly to Anne Ferreira and all her support with Peter, to Greg Sherwood and to Josephine Prieur coming to us all the way from Paris, and to Minya Engelbrecht and Elizabeth Bardin dropping in at the end of the show. Really appreciate it. Have a great evening. Goodbye.